April 1951. The English Channel. Cold, calm, and deceptively peaceful. Beneath those dark waters, a British submarine named HMS Affray slipped silently below the surface for what would be a routine training exercise. However, she never resurfaced. Over the next few months, the Royal Navy launched the largest peacetime search and rescue operation in her naval history. But when they finally found her, more than 76 meters below the waves, she took 75 souls, all to their graves, and no one returned. This is the story of HMS Affray, the last Royal Navy submarine lost at sea, and still remains a contentious issue for debate till this day. HMS Affray, pen number P421, was built during the final years of the Second World War. She belonged to the Amphion class, also known as the A class of submarines, designed for long-range patrols in the Pacific Ocean. She was laid down at Camel Lead Shipyard in Birkenhead in January 1944, where she was launched in April 44 and completed in the following year. But by the time she was entered service, the war was over and Affray never saw combat. Still, she represented the cutting edge of British submarine design for the time. She was 85.8 meters long, 6.68 meters in beam, a 5.2 meter draft, and she could dive down to a depth of 106 meters, which is 350 feet. She displaced 1,360 tons surfaced and nearly 1,600 tons submerged. Powered by diesel-electric engines, she could propel to a speed of 18 knots through 2 shafts on the surface and 8 knots underwater. Her range would allow her to traverse 10,500 nautical miles on the surface at 11 knots, or 16 miles on batteries at 8 knots while submerged, 90 nautical miles if she was doing 3 knots. Her complement was 6 officers, 55 ratings at commissioning, and 6 officers and 58 ratings after modernisation. She was armed with 10 torpedo tubes, with 20 torpedoes carried, arranged with 6 up forward, 4 being internal and 2 external, and then 4 down aft with 2 internal and 2 external. A 4-inch deck gun was also carried for a time too, before that was removed during a modernisation and refit. All in all, Affray was a formidable vessel for her day. She was commissioned in November 1945 and joined the 3rd Submarine Flotilla based at HMS Dolphin in Gosport. Here she conducted post-commissioning trials, diving exercises, and anti-submarine warfare training off the south coast, between Portland and Plymouth. Whilst these duties were routine, it was part of peacetime operations when the Royal Navy was transitioning from the wartime role to a more peacetime role. Therefore, she would be used as one of a training boat, training surface units in anti-submarine warfare. In 1948, she was operating out of Portland, which at the time was one of the Royal Navy's anti-submarine warfare training centres. She took part in hunter-killer exercises for ships and aircraft out of Londonderry and Portland, where she simulated an enemy submarine for them to use as a good basis for testing new sonar systems and radars. In 1949, Affray was paid off into reserve and underwent a major refit in Portsmouth, where she was modernised with streamlining of the hull and conning tower. I believe at this time the gun was actually removed. General maintenance of the underwater hull was made, the batteries were overhauled, and a Type 268 radar was installed with new sonar gear. But more importantly, she was fitted with a snorkel, allowing her to snort at periscope depth to keep her diesel engines running while she was submerged. By early 1950, she was back out of dry dock and recommissioned for active service, rejoining the 3rd Submarine Flotilla, where she resumed the training and exercises program. Some notable operations for the time were submarine warfare exercises in the English Channel, endurance and communications trials in the Western Approaches and also the Bay of Biscay, as well as ASW trials with surface ships and aircraft of the Fleet Air Arm. On the evening of April 16, 1951, HMS Affray left HMS Dolphin in Gosport for a training exercise called Exercise Spring Train. She was to proceed through the channel submerged by night and surfaced by day for battery charging. She was to conduct a practice periscope reconnaissance mission near Alderney in the Channel Islands area, then to return to Portsmouth by the end of the week. But Affray's crew that night wasn't her usual complement. She carried 50 officers and men, along with 25 trainees, including 14 Royal Marines, of which some were SBS, and several young officer cadets gaining some sea time experience. The commanding officer was Lieutenant John Blackman, and just 32 years old, he was already a respected submariner. At 1800, she slipped her moorings and set course for the open sea. Her last radio transmission was sent at 21:15, reporting that she was diving to begin her first exercise. According to the plan, she was to remain submerged overnight and to surface and transmit her surfaced and preceding signal at 0900 on the 17th of April. When Affray failed to send her scheduled surface signal at 0900 hours on the 17th, the Portsmouth Submarine Operations Room began immediate attempts to contact her. Radio messages were sent, signal stations listened, and the hours passed. But by noon on the 17th, with still no response, the Royal Navy officially declared a submarine missing alert. Every available ship, aircraft, and submarine was ordered to sea to search for the submarine. For days, destroyers, minesweepers, and RAF patrol aircraft scoured the seas. Sonar sweeps were carried out over hundreds of square miles, but nothing was found. The press began to circle submarine missing in the Channel. Families gathered in Portsmouth, desperate for any news of the sub. But it would take, unfortunately, 2 more months before HMS Affray was finally found. On June 14, 1951, the salvage vessel HMS Reclaim, equipped with early underwater cameras, confirmed a previously detected sonar contact 46 nautical miles northwest of Alderney in 276 feet of water. Led by Lieutenant Commander Jack Napier, commanding officer of HMS Reclaim, and Lieutenant George Wookey, the diving officer, a small underwater camera nicknamed the Fish was lowered down. And there, in the airy blackness, lay the hull of HMS Affray. Her periscope and snorkel were raised. Her bow had struck the seabed at a steep angle, but there was no sign of an explosion, nor external damage. It was as if she had simply just sunk straight down. The remote camera found a single haunting clue, though. The snorkel was snapped clean in two. The official inquiry began immediately. The snorkel, a tube that allowed submarines to run their diesel engines while submerged, was a relatively new addition to wartime boats. If it had malfunctioned, it could flood the vessel in seconds. Engineers theorized that Affray's snorkel had fractured or come loose underwater, allowing tons of seawater to pour in. This sudden flooding might have caused her to lose buoyancy, sending her plunging to the seabed before the crew could even react. However, the exact cause has never been proven. Complicating matters was the fact that Affray had been reportedly in poor condition before her final voyage, Maintenance crews had reported corrosion, faulty air valves, and hydraulic leaks, though none of these were considered serious enough to delay her departure. The inquiry concluded that the most likely cause was snorkel failure due to metal fatigue. But because no one survived, the precise sequence of events remains unknown. For the Royal Navy, the loss was devastating. 75 men, officers, sailors, and marines, gone without a trace of warning. It was the worst submarine disaster in British waters since the Second World War. In the weeks that followed, memorial services were held across Britain. Families mourned sons, brothers, and husbands. Many of them were only in their 20s. A memorial plaque was finally placed in Gosport's Royal Navy Submarine Museum, bearing the names of every man lost aboard HMS Affray. In 1951, diving technology was not yet advanced enough to raise a submarine from that depth, and so Affray was declared a war grave, left to rest where she fell. Today, her wreck remains intact on the seabed, a silent tomb protected under the Military Remains Act. Over the years, theories have persisted. Was there an onboard fire, a battery explosion, or perhaps a structural failure from years of strain? No answer has ever been confirmed, but one thing is for certain. Affray's loss marked the end of the Royal Navy's wartime submarine fleet, and thus, with new safety measures, improved maintenance standards, and the gradual replacement of said diesel boats for nuclear-powered attack submarines, granted, would take 40 to 50 years. Today, the story of HMS Affray is more than a naval mystery. It is a reminder of the dangers faced by those who serve beneath the sea. Each submarine that sails today carries the lessons learned from tragedies like Affray. And at the bottom of the English Channel, the Affray still lies quietly, engines cold, decks silent, her crew forever on patrol. May they rest in peace.